What is up, Ridge students? Miss y'all so much, and I absolutely can't wait until I'm able to see y'all face to face in person and give you a hug, a little elbow touch, shake your hand, whatever. So what we're going to be talking about today is trusting in the Lord, which I think is something that, everybody can benefit from during this time. I know for me, it was convicting in a way, preparing this message. So I hope that y'all get something out of this as much as I did preparing it. So what we're going to be going to Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. If you want to turn there or if you just want to listen. Proverbs 5 through 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he will make your path straight." So the first part of that verse, trust in the Lord with all your heart, it says it right there. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. When we trust in something, we find security in that thing. We feel safe with that thing. And I'm going to use an illustration that I've seen before. I've used it before. So this chair that I'm sitting in, just a regular office chair, I trust that this chair is going to hold me up. I, put my full weight in this chair and I trust that it's going to hold me up and not break underneath me. And whatever, it is that you're sitting on or laying on, whether it be your bed, a couch, a chair, the floor, whatever it may be, you have trust in that thing. You trust that that thing's not going to, collapse underneath you, or else you wouldn't be sitting on it. So I want you to ask yourself the question, do you have that much trust in the Lord? Are you able to give everything that you have in trusting the Lord, putting all of your weight on him because he can handle it? Or are you scared because you're like, well, I don't know if he can handle this. This is too heavy. But let me tell you, he can handle all of it. Nothing is too heavy for him. You just have to give it all to him. It seems heavy to you, but to him, it's not heavy. So with that, trusting in him with all your heart. So if you have your Bible open, or if you're on your phone or something, I want you to underline, circle, highlight the word all. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, which means not just the parts that are easy. Like I just said, things might seem heavy to you and they might seem hard to you for you to trust somebody with them, but nothing is too heavy for the Lord to take. And we don't just need to go to him when things are great, when things are, going good for us. And we need to completely go to him all the time with all that we have, not just parts of it, not just when things are good, but all of it, and when things are bad too. Also, during this time, I know it's crazy. It's easy to just be like, okay, Lord, well, I think that you have plans for me. Like, I think that you're going to provide for me, or you're going to get me through this season. Okay. But, there's hesitation. It's easy for you to have that hesitation and not completely be like, okay, God, like, I'm giving you 100% of what I have, 100% of my trust. It's easy not to do that. But during this time, with this virus going on, and there's a lot of uncertainties and just craziness, and you really just have to focus on God and trust that he's got this. And before all of this was happening, you were probably in a good place. Even if you weren't, you might be like, okay, well, God's got this under control. It's fine. And then the virus hit and you're like, okay, God, but do you really have this? And after this virus and, all of this is just over with and things are, back to as close back to normal as they can be, are you still going to be able to be like, okay, God, like, I trusted you through that, instead of just being like, okay, God, yeah, I trust you now that you brought me through it. No, you have to trust him before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. So we're going to move on to the second part of the verse 5, that says, "And lean not on your own understanding." What that means is, leaning completely onto Jesus, not trusting in, what you think or what you think but trusting and leaning on the fact that he knows everything. Like, he knows what we're going to think before we think it. He knows what we're going to say before we say it. He knows like what's best. And who are we to be like, oh, I know what's best, like I don't think Jesus can handle that, so I'm going to try to handle it myself. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to lean on our own understanding, because we don't know everything. I'm sorry if I just, hurt your feelings by telling you that you don't know everything, but you don't. Jesus is the only one that knows everything. He's the only one that can, you can truly trust with everything you have and be like, okay, God, like if I give you this, I'm going to trust that, you're going to handle this in the best way. He's the only one that we can do that with. We can't do it ourselves. We can't be like, oh, well, my mom or my dad or, my grandparents, they've got this under control. I'm going to ask them. They know what they're talking about. But in reality, we need to go straight to Jesus every time, because he knows what he's talking about. So we're going to move on to verse 6 now. The first part of verse 6 says, in all your ways, submit to him. And that goes right to the first part of verse 5, which says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Because when we submit, or some versions say acknowledge, when we acknowledge Jesus, we're trusting in him. We're putting our trust in him. When we submit to him, we're putting our trust in him. We're giving him what we have. And, as we acknowledge the Father, we are supposed to not just acknowledge him as, okay, yeah, you're God, I got you. Like, I know, who you are. That's not what that's saying. What it means to submit, or acknowledging him as your Father, is that you acknowledge him because he is the one who's in control. You acknowledge that he is in control of every aspect of your life, and every other aspect of what's going on, of your situations, your circumstances, this crazy virus outbreak, everything. And then now moving on to the final part of verse 6 says, and he will make your paths straight, or some versions might say he will direct your paths. So what that's saying is that he will begin to establish our steps and lead us where he needs us, not where we think we need to be or where we want to be, but where he needs us. That's ultimately where he's going to lead us every time. And so what we need to do is just trust, there's that word again, in the direction that he is putting us. A lot of times he'll put us in places where we're uncomfortable, just like, where we are now with Corona. And, you're like, okay, God, well, I don't really like this, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason why all of this is happening. And he's gonna direct our paths where they need to go. And also another thing, it's not gonna be, where we're comfortable. It might not be when we want something to happen, but it's going to be in his timing, because he knows best. He knows, where we need to go. He knows where he's sending us. And we just need to trust that he knows what he is doing, that he's in control. And so I'm going to read Proverbs 16:3 and Proverbs 16:9. Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your paths. And also verse 9, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. So in this time where you're like, okay, God, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? It's a time of waiting. And while you're in that time of waiting, our faith grows. It can either grow or it can wilt. When it grows, that's when we're, okay, God, like, I'm going to give you everything. But when it wilts is we're like, God, like, can you actually handle this? Like, do you know what you're doing? Or, okay, I got this. Like, I can handle this. But, we don't want to wilt. We don't want to be like a flower that, everybody just passes by and says, oh, that's not a very pretty flower. You want to be like, man, that's a beautiful flower. And sometimes growing isn't fun. Like, growing isn't fun. I don't know about you, but I know whenever I was younger, I would get growing pains in my legs really bad. You may have called them something different, but I would get them so bad in my legs where it would wake me up in the middle of the night and I had to go run to my parents, and my mom would have to massage my calves until my growing pains went away. Growing is painful, but it is needed. And so during this time of waiting, where we're not sure where our next steps are going to be or what they're going to look like, we can't just sit around feeling broken and defeated and depressed, because we have to believe and trust that God has got this. And one thing that we can do during this time of craziness, where you're like, okay, I don't really know what I'm gonna do, just praise Jesus, run to the Father. That's sometimes that's all he wants us to do, is just go to him and be like, hey God, what's up? Like, this is what's going on. And side note, let me tell you, if you're ever talking to God and you're like, oh, I don't know really how to talk to him that great, like, is there like an order of how I'm supposed to pray? Don't even worry about that. Go to him like he is your best friend, like he is a father figure. Go to him and be like, hey God, what's up? Like, that's okay. You don't have to say, dear Lord, thank you for this. I hope you bless this. You don't have to pray like that. If you do pray like that, that's totally fine too. But it doesn't have to be, this perfectly planned out prayer. Just go to him. That's all he wants from you. So moving back to this form of trust, when we hand everything over to Jesus, everything, it may not seem easy right away, or like things are lifted right away, but in time, once you hand everything over to God, your shoulders, it's going to feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. It's going to feel like you are back on the ground. I don't know if anyone has ever been skydiving. I haven't, but I've heard stories about, people jumping out of the plane and they're like, well, this is awesome. But then, they might have a panic attack and start freaking out. Then once they're back on the ground, they're like, oh, okay, I'm okay now. And that's how it feels once you give everything over to Christ. And if you feel like you have given everything over to Christ and you still feel that weight, maybe you haven't given everything. Reevaluate, the things that are going on in your life, and maybe you haven't given everything to God. Maybe, you need to. So, what I want y'all to take away from this, if you take anything away from this, is to trust in the Lord with all you have. Not just the easy parts, not the hard parts, but all of it. Not just the parts that you're like, oh, this isn't that important. No, you need to give it all over to Jesus and trust that he's going to take care of it, that he is in control.